All right. All right. Did you notice that this show doesn't have any commercials? I'm not selling you diapers or vitamins or smoothies or gasoline. That's because I don't want corporate sponsors telling us what to investigate and what to say. Instead, you're our sponsors. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. If you want more investigations, more hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to ICanDecide.org and donate now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in the world. It's time to step out onto the high wire. Well, I'm excited to announce that we are broadcasting right now live from our brand new studio here in Austin, Texas. Obviously, there's a lot of work to do on the set. We're still building it, but I've got the video wall behind me. But probably the greatest advancement that we have in technology taking place today is the fact that it is no longer 90 degrees here in the studio, where we were having to use fans and dry ice and every sort of other insanity to try and keep me cool. In fact, that's probably really the origination of the best, is just so you couldn't see the sweat. But today, I'm proud to announce, it is a beautiful and balmy 72.7 degrees here in the studio. So the question is, what is the high wire like when Del Bigtree is not sweating to death? We're about to find out. We've got an amazing show for you guys today. There's an incredible book that is sweeping the nation called Corona, False Alarm. This is by world-renowned scientists Dr. Shukarit Bhakti and Professor Karina Rice. They are coming on in just a few moments. I'm going to be talking to Dr. Sherry Tenpenny about a statement that's just come out from Anthony Fauci. Is it true? What is the value of what he is saying? But first, I think that what's really been crazy, as many of you knew, we had to pre-tape a show just last week so that we could move into this new studio, get all of our technology up and running so that we could be broadcasting live on our website. And by the way, there's lots of places to be watching us, but you always know you can find us here at thehighwire.com. But right now, so far, Facebook hasn't cut us off, and we're not on YouTube, but many other platforms. There you go, Facebook.com, Highwire Talk, at Highwire Talk on Twitter, thehighwire.com, float.app/thehighwire, and dlive.tv/thehighwire. And, of course, Roku. If you have Roku, a lot of people are coming up and saying they're really enjoying the experience of watching the high wire on their television sets through Roku. We're going to continue to look at other platforms as we move forward. But during that week where we were having to just watch a pre-taped show load up, it felt like the entire world changed. I remember when Donald Trump first took office, he was basically being called the anti-vaccine president for statements he'd made while out there on the campaign trail. Trump, an anti-vaxxer, remember the National Review said. Also, we had the insider, the powerful media mogul at the core of Trump's debunked views on vaccines and autism. Facebook will crack down on anti-vaccine content. All of this was happening, right? But then all of a sudden, the high wire decides to take a week off after, standing up against, all of the takeover of the pharmaceutical industry around the world. And then suddenly, it was like the world went into opposite day. It looked something like this.
We are delivering life-saving therapies and will produce a vaccine before the end of the year, or maybe even sooner.
Critics worry a vaccine might be rushed, but the White House says the timing has nothing to do with the election. CDC director is urging governors nationwide to get ready for a possible vaccine release by November 1st. Just days before the election.
My concern is that we're really rushing through this vaccine development process. And just to remind your viewers, Katie, the fastest we've ever developed a vaccine for safe delivery into patients has been 4 years. The fact that we're trying to do this for this novel disease in less than a year, it makes a lot of us quite skeptical, Katie.
A new poll finds 78% of people think that the vaccine is being driven more by politics than science.
Do the president's actions encourage public trust in vaccines and increase the number of people likely to get the vaccine, or do they discourage Americans from getting vaccinated for COVID-19?
Let's just say there's a vaccine that is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
I would not trust Donald Trump, and it would have to be a credible source of information that talks about the efficacy and the reliability of whatever he's talking about. I will not take his word for it.
We need to encourage people to stop attacking the process. Everyone out there who says, I won't take this vaccine if, or I don't trust this vaccine unless, is instilling further hesitancy and hurting us.
If someone is pointing out a case where a vaccine caused harm, or that they're worried about it, that's a difficult thing to say from my perspective, that you shouldn't be allowed to express at all.
Senator Harris and I laid out 3 questions this administration is going to have to answer to assure the American people that politics will not play a role whatsoever in the vaccine process.
Well, I think it's very irresponsible for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to be calling into question the incredible innovation of our scientists working around the clock to develop vaccines for the American people. Our great pharmaceutical companies are cutting no corners. We've made it clear. We've made billions of dollars available to them to develop these vaccines in record time.
If Donald Trump can't give answers and the administration can't give answers to these 3 questions, the American people should not have confidence.
Biden and his very liberal running mate should immediately apologize for the reckless anti-vaccine rhetoric that they are talking right now.
Watching that last week in review, it was almost as though the skies had opened up and the Ghostbusters were going to be needed. Remember this line?
Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
It's absolutely crazy, isn't it, to think that the anti-vax president is now calling Joe Biden, Kamala Harris anti-vax and demanding a retraction. Democrat Biden warns against rushing out against coronavirus vaccine, says Trump cannot be trusted. Trump's rush for a COVID vaccine could make it less likely to work. You know, what's really interesting about this, just very quickly, first of all, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump is not the one actually making the vaccine. I don't think he has anything to do with it. But the concern, right, when you hear about the concern, now all of a sudden, the entire world is worried that we may be rushing the science too fast, that maybe we're not going to have proper safety studies done. I mean, this is only the language that we've been speaking for the last 4 years. So Biden, Kamala Harris, all of you out there, Elizabeth Warren, welcome to the club. Here we go. Now, what is really going on? And think about it. The concern is that Tony Fauci or the FDA or the CDC might rush this vaccine out based on a bias, based on the president wanting to achieve something. Do you see the irony in that? That their concern is that there's a bias behind this process. Well, there's always been a bias. How about all of those scientists that always stood to make millions and billions of dollars making vaccines and getting them onto the market as soon as they could? I think all of this is beautiful, and it's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Questions and discussions that we have been fighting to have happen in this country and around the world since the beginning of the High Wire. That was the entire point of the High Wire when we started this show about 4 years ago. So now, finally, people are asking the right questions. Will the vaccine be safe? How long was the safety study? Could you account for all the issues that were there? Did you use a saline placebo? It's amazing, isn't it? Guess what? There is no returning from this moment. See, for the first time ever, the entire world has now just dropped that mantra, that mythological idea that vaccines are safe and effective. Vaccines are safe and effective. I've said it over and over again, as though vaccines are made by angels in the same building that makes every drug that has a ticker tape of side effects that could absolutely damage your life or kill you. Welcome to the world where vaccines are just as capable of injuring people. But it's amazing to watch this argument. It's amazing to watch the news. And just to get to the bottom of just how crazy and maybe role reversing the world has become, let's bring in Jeffrey Jackson for the Jackson Report. Jeffrey, we live in incredibly strange times. It feels as though, the entire world is turned on its head. Maybe you can bring some clarity to that. What all's been happening in this last week or two?
Well, there's another narrative that for the greater part of 2020 that the public has been taught to believe is not true. This narrative now is being debated. It comes from Chinese virologist Dr. Li Mengyan. She revealed some information that was on Tucker Carlson Fox News recently. Take a look at this.
Right. I can present the solid scientific evidence to our audience that this virus, COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, actually is not from nature. It is a man-made virus created in the lab based on the China military discovered and owned the very unique bat coronavirus, which cannot affect people, but after the modification, becomes a very harmful virus.
You're saying that the Chinese government manufactured this virus, if I'm hearing you correctly. That's what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Based on the virus genome, it's basically like our fingerprint. So you can see the very unusual characters in their genome, which clearly, based on the other evidence they left during the modification, we can say finally this is exactly the one come from their own special bat coronavirus and then target human.
Wow. I mean, obviously I've been saying from the beginning, I'm still going to say it right now because everyone gets censored that goes anywhere near this discussion. This is just yet another player stepping forward, another theory with some information very similar to those that have also spoken about this potentially being a man-made vaccine. Of course, we brought up this possibility with Dr. James Lyons-Weiler months and months and months ago. I've been censored. That show was censored. There's been a lot of pressure, fact-checking going on anytime we address this issue. But the discussion really isn't over, is it? I mean, I think the fact that Fox is now covering this, it's the most mainstream and probably the biggest headline we've seen on this specific topic so far. So what's being revealed here?
Yeah, well, just for that interview, Facebook slapped a warning label on that interview. Twitter banned Dr. Yan's account, banned it, suspended it. So she's a former researcher at the Hong Kong School of Public Health. And basically, as she said in the interview, she's saying there's evidence in the genome that it was lab created, that it was meant to target humans or is engineered to target humans. And as should be done, people are looking at the genomic sequences, but Dr. Yan's recent paper claims that the work is being censored by scientific journals. But if people remember back in August, this isn't a first revelation of this. Back in August, the Daily Mail reported that the Chinese NIH COVID origin story. So it writes, where is the Wuhan virus researcher who was named as patient 0? And why were roadblocks placed around the lab where she worked in October? Top U.S. bodies asked explosive questions on the origin of the coronavirus. Now, looking into this story, again, this was just in August, just last month, it says the U.S. government's leading health research body has raised a series of bombshell concerns over the origins of the coronavirus pandemic and the activities of a secretive Chinese laboratory that was investigating bat diseases. It goes on. The National Institutes of Health has asked if COVID-19 was linked to the deaths of 3 minors 8 years ago and questioned whether the high-security laboratory in Wuhan possessed samples of the virus prior to the pandemic's outbreak late last year.
All right, leave that up. I want people to really, let's focus on that line right there because I think this is huge. We're talking about the National Institutes of Health where Tony Fauci works. This is the most funded agency, health agency that the U.S. government has, is asking this question: if COVID-19 was linked to the deaths of 3 minors 8 years ago. Remember, it's called COVID-19 because it supposedly appeared at the end of 2019, and our own U.S. health agency is asking if the COVID-19 was linked to the deaths of 3 minors 8 years ago. That is a very telling question, which means that says to me right there, I know there's more to this article, that says right there our own government health agencies are questioning whether or not that there's foul play here or that there's some sort of man-made or laboratory issue, even if it's only having taken an old virus found in a cave, I guess, and doing something with it, keeping it in a laboratory where it could be released later, either accidentally or on purpose. But pretty shocking that Facebook is censoring, Twitter is censoring something that the #1 most funded government health agency in our country is actually still questioning. I think that's brilliant. All right, continue.
Yeah, we're not talking about settled science here. So continuing back in this article, it says, quote, the agency also demanded to know more about the apparent disappearance of a scientist at the lab rumored to be patient 0 and questioned if roadblocks were placed around the Wuhan Institute of Virology between October 14th and 19th last year. The NIH letter sent by Michael Lawler, Deputy Director for Extramural Research, said there was serious biosafety concerns over research at the Wuhan lab. This confirms a series of MOS revelations about safety procedures. He demanded a sample of their virus used to determine the genetic code and requested answers on the apparent disappearance of Huang Yanling, a scientist researcher who worked in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but whose lab web presence has been deleted. And finally, Lawler said the agency needed to know why the Wuhan Institute failed to note that the RATG13 virus, the bat-derived coronavirus, in its collection with greatest similarity to SARS-CoV-2, was actually isolated from an abandoned mine where 3 men died in 2012 with an illness remarkably similar to COVID-19.
That's incredible. And, you know, when I'm looking at this and I'm just thinking how, you know, we know that there is, as this scientist on Fox News pointed out, everything has a fingerprint, right? I remember this discussion when we're looking at weapons of mass destruction back, you know, in the Iraq war and wanting to get in there. We wanted to get inside of those labs, get inside of those facilities so that we could see where things were coming from, what was going on. It seems so obvious to me that we should be gaining access, the world should have access, the United States of America and our top scientists should be inside of this lab seeing every coronavirus that they're working with. I believe, you know, complete transparency should be taking place. But think how terrifying. I mean, I can't help but get chills to think that this Chinese scientist has now come forward, or I guess she's from Hong Kong, has come forward. She is obviously risking her life, at least based on everything we know about China, how they handle situations with people that defect or go against what they're saying. She's risking her life, and yet Facebook is shutting down this video, and Twitter is stopping her from being able to speak to the public. It feels to me it's like someone escapes from a concentration camp when we really, the moment they get on Twitter and they finally get a news agency to listen to them saying, there's a great atrocity going on here. There's a gigantic crime that's taking place, crimes against humanity, and we shut them down, and we shut down their Twitter feed, and we make sure that they can't speak. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't be researching everything that's being said, but why are you silencing? What is it that Twitter knows? What is it that Facebook knows? Nobody. The NIH is investigating this right now as we speak. How dare you silence a scientist that is clearly putting her life on the line? Why don't we research it first? I mean, it just shows you how deeply entrenched these organizations are. And to me, they are working with foreign agencies. I believe it is proof in many ways that Twitter is siding with China right now over the United States of America. There's certainly, I know they keep pointing to the World Health Organization is what is driving their scientific research. And if the WHO doesn't agree, well, I have news for you. The United States of America no longer funds the WHO. The WHO is funded by China and Bill Gates. And so I think to be using that as your template to decide what is true and what is not, you know, this is the time we're all supposed to be investigating. Somebody show significant proof. And here's where I'm at, Jeffrey. Until someone does actually show the genomic sequence so that all the scientists that we work with around the world that are asking the same question, what is this sequence now? We need to see the exact ones that are inside of the laboratories. And I'm talking about the laboratories all around the world. Everybody put your coronaviruses on the table, and let's take a look at what you were working on and see if it has any similarity to what we are now finding in patients that are dying around the world. This is an incredible story, and to watch, you know, independent, communication companies like Facebook and Twitter sticking themselves, inserting themselves into this international crisis and conversation right now. I'll tell you, man, I think that we're going to be a part of making sure that people have got to end up in courtrooms about this and have to face the decisions that they made. It's an incredible story, and I'm, as a reporter, all I can say, and I know that you're here with me, Jeffrey, it is fascinating, isn't it? Isn't this just, where is this going to end up?
It's probably one of the top, arguably one of the most important stories of the world right now, of where this thing was created. So, like you said, everyone throw their chips on the table. Let's be transparent. Going back to a story and a topic that you talked about at the beginning of the show, this is out of CNN. You might want to put your seatbelt on for this one because things are changing at CNN. Headline says, past vaccine disasters show why rushing a coronavirus vaccine now would be colossally stupid. Oh, CNN, where have you been all my life?
What? You mean we've made mistakes before with vaccines, that rushing vaccines isn't a good idea? What were they talking about in this article? What were they referencing when they were talked about older vaccines or past mistakes?
It turns out there was past mistakes. They referenced the Cutter Institute. That was in the 50s where people were injected with the polio vaccine when they were initially rolling out the polio vaccine. Some of it had the live polio in it. It actually gave people polio. It also talked about the SV40 cancer. This was when they used monkey kidneys to grow the virus on. It later turned out that it was alleged that it gave lots of people cancer. There's some bombshell videos on YouTube about the scientists talking about this. The first swine flu outbreak in the U.S., 1976, where they made the vaccine compulsory, mandatory, that led to an outbreak of Guillain-Barré's syndrome. They didn't mention the Tuskegee experiment, but it's nice, I guess, to have CNN at the table now. So we're acknowledging vaccine injury. CNN is putting this flag up as well as a journalist outlet that's going to be talking about this. So this is an exciting time, I guess.
It was amazing seeing this headline. I just thought basically they were quoting, you could have grabbed excerpts either from our own white papers at ICanDecide.org and the work that we've done, or a lot of these statements are right from Suzanne Humphrey's book, Dissolving Illusions, which is one of the top books that I recommend to anyone that's really asking questions about those old vaccines, about polio, about smallpox, because that's where this argument always goes. Well, what about smallpox? What about polio? Well, go read Dissolving Illusions, and clearly now CNN is finally doing some reading. It's an amazing time, and I'm grateful, right? I'm not going to put them down. Again, welcome, welcome to being woke. Welcome to asking the appropriate questions. Yes, it is possible to have a dangerous vaccine. It is possible to make a vaccine too quickly. And think about the things that they listed there, right? You had the Cutter, situation where they were giving people polio because they hadn't killed the virus the right way, and they ended up, putting out a vaccine that was giving people live polio. But I think even more shocking is that SV40, the simian retrovirus 40, that caused cancer in America in arguably millions of people across this country. That's an issue that if one of these vaccines that we're researching right now, whether it's AstraZeneca's or Moderna's or Pfizer's, Johnson & Johnson's, there is no way a vaccine released this year or even the middle of next year will have the time to look at, Does it cause cancer down the road? There'll be no way. There's no way you don't develop cancer in 3 months. It's going to take a couple of years to really watch cancer grow, and then in enough people that you could see that was happening. So once again, they're right. We're setting ourselves up for another catastrophic event. And those are, I think those are the least of your problems. I think cancer is the least of your problems when we've been talking about all the immune enhancement issues. But amazing, right? Here we are. The high wire has been leading this. We've been talking about this. We've been attacked by CNN specifically, showing our show and the dangerous rhetoric that we're putting out there. 4 years we've been here, and now CNN is riding on our coattails. I have to say, Jeffrey, it feels just a little bit, I feel a little bit good, don't you? Feel a little bit good about that?
just a little bit. Well, all those things that CNN reported, and it's reported in Dissolving Illusions, an amazing book, you're right. What's the best way to avoid that? Well, for the vaccine manufacturers, a simple pledge. So this is what we're looking at. 9 vaccine makers signed safety pledge and race for COVID-19 vaccine. The pledge, basically to ensure public confidence, uphold integrity, and commit to high ethical standards. A whole paragraph in that pledge about trusting the FDA. And on the same day, wait for it, AstraZeneca, Oxford University's vaccine manufacturer, suspends leading COVID-19 vaccine trials after participants' illness. What was the illness? We go to Business Times. Business Times asks, it's transverse myelitis. They decide to start talking about transverse myelitis because now the media is tasked with having to downplay and explain vaccine injury. Business Times writes, although the reaction was a routine hiccup that usually occurs during clinical trials, the company did not divulge any further details on the nature of the illness in the study participant. So now we have transverse myelitis.
Whoa. Let's put that back up. I want this to sink in for people. Again, look at what they're saying. Although the reaction was a routine hiccup that usually occurs during clinical trials. Really? I don't think people knew that. I didn't think that people know that, oh, you mean that they routinely develop a neurological disorder that can lead to paralysis throughout the body? I mean, I guess that's routine. Oh, and it's just a hiccup? I mean, right there points to exactly what my issue has been with the reporting around vaccines from the beginning. This is not routine. Someone losing feeling in their hands and feet and potentially having a swelling in their spinal cord is not routine. We cannot look at this as routine, but that's what media does, right? Oh, it's just simply a hiccup. Someone's life is destroyed forever, but, you know, they'll be fine. And forget them. It's the greater good. It's really incredible. So what have they looked at? I guess this has been in the news, right? It's a big montage on this. Let's take out how the news has been talking about this.
Pausing its global trials of a coronavirus vaccine.
Breaking news on a possible COVID vaccine. Testing has been paused
On hold worldwide.
Drug maker AstraZeneca is halting its phase 3 trial of a possible COVID-19 vaccine after one participant came down with an unexplained illness.
Healthy volunteer walked in healthy, now has a significant problem. They've got to investigate that.
It's not exactly known what happened to the patient or if it's even linked to the vaccine.
This is the first report of a serious safety issue for a vaccine that is in late-stage trials.
We don't have a sense from AstraZeneca how long this pause will last, how much of a concern it is for them.
The person who has the adverse effect, they need to see if this person recovers.
There's so many questions about what this event is, whether it was caused by the vaccine, and what impact it'll have on this trial and potentially other trials. Right now, those are all question marks.
And this just underscores the importance of widespread human testing in phase 3 trials before any vaccine goes to market.
There's a lot to this story, but before we go any further, I want to say that one of the things that why I started our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network, was so that we could investigate safety and safety of vaccines. This is the work that we've been doing. And so when I look at this story, it's not lost on me. I mean, they're going to make the world think, oh, transverse myelitis was this really weird thing. It was, as though somehow someone broke out in leprosy from the vaccine. Odds are it's not caused by the vaccine. And you know for a fact, I tweeted this headline out as soon as it happened. I basically said it will be 1 week before they're saying, oh, nature did this, not the vaccine, couldn't possibly be the monkey cold virus, adenovirus we're using, or the gene that we're putting inside of that vector to go and try and mutate the genes in your body. That couldn't have anything to do with why you're having an autoimmune neurological disaster experience. But I really want to point out, just so people, because you listen to the news and like, we got to find out if the vaccine had anything to do with this. We got to see, where this comes from. We know viruses can cause this issue. Really? Because if you look at vaccine inserts, it's not just viruses. Let me just give you a taste of what we already know. This isn't rare. Look at this. This is the Engerex hepatitis B vaccine. Nervous system disorders, transverse myelitis is listed. Now remember, they only list these in these inserts if they believe there is a potential causal relationship. Not anecdotal, it has to be causal to make it onto these sheets. Hepatitis B, this is the Recombavax. Possible disorders, side effects, post-marketing experience, transverse myelitis. Twinrix, hepatitis A and B. Possible side effects, adverse reactions, transverse myelitis. Gardasil, transverse myelitis. Fluzone, high-dose quadrivalent flu vaccine, transverse myelitis in the nervous system disorder commonly reported. Afluria, quadrivalent, transverse myelitis. I can just run through them really quick. Measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. Transverse myelitis has been experienced by people that got this vaccine. Again, Menactra, meningococcal, transverse myelitis. You get the idea here, people? This isn't a rare event. This isn't like, oh my God, this really strange thing happened, and what they're going to try and tell you is this was going to naturally occur in this person. Now remember that when we do these trials, these are the healthiest people we can find. They have to be able to prove that they drink very little alcohol. They are on no drugs or medications for any illnesses that we know of. They, they haven't had things like more than 4 sexual partners in their entire lives. These are superheroes. This is like the Justice League that are in these trials. So when Superman gets transverse myelitis or Wonder Woman gets transverse myelitis, you really need to stop for a second and say, hold on. Why would that happen? They're going to try and tell us that it was just a natural occurrence, that this person just spontaneously was going to combust into transverse myelitis, whether they were in the trial or not. Am I right, Jeffrey? Is that where this story's going?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's another data point to that, too. The Department of Justice, it releases a report. It just released a report of the last 6 months of vaccine injury claims that have been compensated through the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. And in that release, they showed that mostly from the flu vaccine, that transverse myelitis on this chart here, it's only 5, but 8 total cases in the last 6 months have been compensated for transverse myelitis. So it's not only in the inserts, it's being compensated actively in the vaccine court.
And just for everyone that's questioning what is transverse myelitis, very simply put, it's swelling in the spinal cord that can lead to temporary paralysis in different parts of the body. It can also lead to permanent lifelong paralysis. So a very, very serious deal. Well, where's this story going? I mean, we saw that it got paused. What are they saying now?
So Stat News got out front of this story with their headline, and they said COVID-19 vaccine trial participant had serious neurological symptoms but could be discharged today, AstraZeneca CEO says. So in this article, there's a quote, it says, Pascal Seurat, he's the CEO of AstraZeneca, also confirmed that the clinical trial was halted once previously in July after a participant experienced neurological symptoms. Upon further examination, that participant was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, deemed to be unrelated to the COVID-19 vaccine treatment, he said. So the story gets deeper here. What happened was there was an already planned investors call, a private investors call that JP Morgan had set up. And that was about a day after the transverse myelitis was reported throughout all of the media. And it was revealed in there that, okay, well, we actually paused it in July, says AstraZeneca's CEO, because there was an MS situation, but that was fine. No transparency, nothing in the public, despite any type of pledge that they gave. There was no reporting on it whatsoever. So that one we're lost on. We don't really have any information on that. But this is, again, to private investors. After that, this is when the media reporting starts really picking up, because now we're looking at kind of like a damage control situation. So FDA senior officials come out, they try to put their stake in the ground. FDA career executives were following the science to protect public health in a pandemic. They said, we're committed to making decisions guided by the best evidence. Our approach has been and must remain the gold standard that all can rely upon. And then we get to the feds. Feds are very concerned. The headline that was just up there, this is the article that really slams it out of the park. Feds very concerned about AstraZeneca vaccine side effect. Now, side effects, plural, it should be. And it says sometimes an underlying medical condition is, quote, unmasked by a person's immune response to the vaccine, leading to illness, as happened with the MS patient. In that case, the trial might be continued without fear because the illness was not specific to the vaccine.
I mean, how do they, this is the thing, folks, just use your common sense. How do they figure that out? How do they know? They're going to say the same thing about the transverse myelitis because there's no way to really determine. Did it happen in the placebo group? Oh, wait a minute. AstraZeneca doesn't have a saline placebo group. How convenient, right? How convenient so that we can't say, hey, look, the 15,000 people in the saline placebo group, no one got MS, nobody got transverse myelitis. That's why they don't want placebo groups. That's why we passed that petition. We petitioned the FDA. For anyone joining us right now, we submitted a petition demanding that a saline placebo be used for any vaccine that's going to be approved in the United States of America, and they did it. 3 or 4 days after we made that request, we saw a shift in the protocol for phase 3 trials. We are actually having an effect on the FDA, on the CDC now. Why? Because we've already won lawsuits against them. Lawsuits against the National Institute of Health, FDA, CDC, and Health and Human Services. So guess what? There they are. This is what the work that we've been doing. Aside from running this television show, we are suing government agencies for lying, for cheating, for hiding, for not being transparent about what's going on. And now they're having to listen to us because they don't want us to win any more lawsuits, especially not when the entire world is watching these trials under a microscope. Now, Jeffrey, how common is transverse myelitis? What is it that we're supposed to understand about this?
Let's look at some of the reporting. We'll take it directly from the reporting. The Daily Beast says it's 1 in 250,000. It says neurologists who study illnesses like transverse myelitis say they are rare, occurring at a rate of perhaps 1 in 250,000 people, and strike most often as a result of the body's immune response to the virus. Less frequently, such episodes have also been linked to vaccines. Now, the reporting says that the British Oxford trials enrolled more than 12,000 participants. So now we have a ballpark number. So here we are. We have a rate of, in the general population, of 1 in 250,000, and now we have a number of 1 in 12,000 or around there. So doing the numbers on that, we're looking at basically a 1,600 to a 2,100% increase in the normal background risk for transverse myelitis in this trial.
Meaning if you just essentially look at the world as your placebo group and say your average person has a risk of 1 in 250,000, your average participant in this trial is 1 in 12,000, that is a significantly higher risk from the vaccine than from naturally occurring events. Now, they could argue, I suppose, and I'm sure they're going to, that this was a naturally occurring event and it was just by happenstance that one of the 12,000 got the, the affliction of transverse myelitis. But I'm also, I'm just putting this out there. I'm hearing a lot of murmurs behind the scenes saying that they believe there was another transverse myelitis case inside of these trials. We're looking into that. Boy, is that going to be troubling. It's troubling enough that not only did you have transverse myelitis, you had MS, but if they have another case like this, and, here's what, are they going to stop this trial? It seems to me you better just stop everything until you can really drill down and figure out what's going on here. Where is this going?
Yeah, so, 4 days later, AstraZeneca resumed the trial. This was in Reuters. It is restarted, and again, 4 days. Now, the NIH says the cause of transverse myelitis is not completely known. So apparently this crack team of independent safety researchers found out in 4 days that, well, it wasn't caused by the vaccine. So that's good. But in the U.S., it's still paused. So FDA Commissioner Hahn had to come out and in an article from, I believe this was USA Today, U.S. FDA's Commissioner Hahn plans significant work with AstraZeneca in COVID-19 trial inquiry. And this is a shocking statement. He says, we don't have all facts, so we don't know the causation per se of this, but we really need to look into it. Now, this is several days later that they still don't have all the facts. The investors had some of the facts, but the FDA's commissioner doesn't have all the facts to restart the trial in the US. What happened to the pledge? What happened to transparency? I thought this was the cornerstone of Big Pharma and AstraZeneca, which was on that pledge.
And to be very clear, it's not like, well, it's Oxford and this is UK's vaccine and they can do what they want. This is the UK's problem. My understanding is, if I remember correctly, we've already sunk over $1 billion into the development of this vaccine. I think we're already making, 100 million vials of this vaccine as we speak in case it's ready to go. Add this to the fact that, remember, we were reporting months ago that in the phase, was it 1 or 2 trials, that when the macaque monkeys were tested and they were given the challenge study, this proved to not be efficacious at all. All of the monkeys got sick again after having had the vaccine. So all the way back then, we were asking, why are they going forward with a phase 3 trial when the vaccine doesn't even work? It didn't even stop transmission. All the monkeys got sick. The vaccine didn't protect them. And now we have people getting serious injuries, neurological disorders like multiple sclerosis and transverse myelitis. Let me couch that. We don't have definitive proof. What we know is this is happening at the same time as the trials amongst the healthiest people they could find in a study that has no decent, real saline placebo group. It's really shocking. But by the way, Jeffrey, I think this is why Dr. Paul Offit, who made the rotavirus vaccine, and Dr. Peter Hotez have been screaming from the mountaintops. This was their greatest fear, wasn't it? Their greatest fear was that to be as bold as to say, we are going to create this vaccine in the next 6 months, a vaccine that's been attempted for over 20 years and failed the entire time, that we will suddenly figure out all of our problems in 6 months. I think Offit and these people that have fought to keep that brainwashing alive, that vaccines are safe and effective no matter how they're made or by who they're made. Don't worry, the science is always sound. They knew damn well if you watch the sausage being made under a microscope, you would see that these events, as that article said, are happening. These are regular events in trials. People really get really sick. And the pharmaceutical industry that stands to make billions of dollars does their own safety research. They're the ones that go in and say, hey, we looked at it and we found that our product was not responsible. Therefore, we're moving forward. It will go through the FDA. The FDA will buy that. They'll put it on the market. And then all of a sudden, the company will start making billions of dollars. And we will all forget that people got injured. And then there'll be a vaccine court that's starting to pick up people. Most people's doctors will be saying, I know you're paralyzed right now, but all of my science says, they're telling me that transverse myelitis is not a side effect of the COVID-19 vaccine. This is how this game is played. This is the first time it's being played out in the public eye. So in many ways, I think this is a beautiful thing. This is transparency, whether they like it or not. There's nothing they can do about it.
And we have a captive public who's been taught from the media and from the medical community that the science has been settled and vaccines are safe. And now what's happening with these trials, with the injury being reported, the Johnson & Johnson trials are seeing people jump ship. So this is out of Spain. Some volunteers quit J&J COVID-19 trial in Spain after AstraZeneca scare investigator. So in the article, it says many have called to ask us some more detail about the risk of the vaccine, whether what happened with the vaccine had anything to do with the one we are studying. These types of questions, Borobia said, he did not say how many people had dropped out. There would be a good number to check out. And then we have the New York Times jumping in, more damage control. Now that these media outlets have to catch up, and it's interesting to watch. Vaccine makers keep safety details quiet, alarming scientists. Researchers say drug companies need to be more transparent. And it says the company still has, this is AstraZeneca, still has not given any detail about the patient's condition, nor has it released a transcript of Mr. Sorat's remarks to investors. Again, a still closed door, but they pledge, they promise. And it goes on, none of the 3 companies with coronavirus vaccines in advanced clinical trials in the United States have made public the protocols and statistical analysis plans for those trials. So again, so much for transparency. Welcome to the party, New York Times.
Welcome to the party. You know, and I've told this story. It's just when I was in Kansas, we're going to talk about the incredible rally I was at earlier this week. But I was in a really intense interview with a writer from the New York Times just over a month or so ago who was grilling me. How could I not say that I was going to take the COVID-19 vaccine when it was ready? I was explaining myself that the science is really would have to prove out. There's no way that in the next 6 months it can prove to be safe. But I said something to this reporter. At a certain point, she said, well, what do you have to say for yourselves that, you know, the consensus of scientists, millions of scientists or whatever, 99% of scientists around the world say that vaccines are safe and effective, yet you stand opposed to them. Who do you think you are? I said, I'm someone who actually reads studies, which you clearly do not do. I said this to her on the phone. I said, you see, the only difference between you and I as a reporter is that when an expert, one of those 99% you're quoting to me, when an expert says to me, vaccines are safe and effective, or this vaccine, MMR or DTaP, doesn't cause autism, I say, please provide me with the science that has led you to that conclusion. I'll read it right now. And I said, that's the difference. See, you take the expert opinion and your job is done. You get to go write your paper. New York Times doesn't ask you any more questions. The expert said, so therefore it must be. I imagine Woodward and Bernstein should have stopped at Nixon said, so therefore he must be right, because that's what we're talking about. Your experts are all getting funded by the pharmaceutical industry that's making these products. So I said to her, I know for a fact you have never read the studies. And she said, wow, that's awfully presumptive of you, Mr. Bigtree, to say that, that I've never read the studies. There's no way for you to know that. I say, oh, no, there is. You know how I know? Because if you actually read these studies, and my nonprofit has read them all, then you would be on my side. And so we went back and forth in this, what was probably about a 1-hour interview, and she finally admitted to me at a certain point, she's like, well, I will admit this, you're right. I haven't read the studies. And I said, you didn't have to tell me that. I mean what I'm saying. I know this to be true. So welcome. New York Times, after, multiple interviews I've done with you, coming after me, attacking me for asking valid questions like, where is the transparency in vaccine data? Where's the data? Where's the science? Where are the studies? How many kids do you think were involved in that childhood vaccine trial before, you started injecting it into your children? So once again, CNN, New York Times, welcome to the party. Jeffrey, this is fantastic. I mean, it's unfortunate people have to be injured to learn what you and I already know from multiple investigations, but the world is really changing. I think we are evolving. We're waking up. In many ways, this feels like a dream come true for the work that we've been doing here on the High Wire.
Yeah, magnifying glass. The world is putting a magnifying glass on AstraZeneca, on Johnson & Johnson, on Pfizer, on Moderna, and these trials are under more scrutiny than any trial perhaps in the history of the world. So stay tuned, because there's going to be some fireworks. I really have a feeling. That's amazing. Jeffrey, thank you for your great work. I appreciate it. We'll look forward to seeing what happens the rest of this week. See you next week. Thanks, Del. Well, look, definitely check out Jeffrey's work on our website, thehighwire.com. He writes articles every single week, gets into a lot more detail. For those of you that still read, you should really check out the Jackson Report. It's doing really great work at the High Wire. I want to take this moment really quickly, though, to talk about the work that we have been doing. It is so critical that we continue to do the investigations that no one else in this country or around the world has ever done. Informed Consent Action Network is the nonprofit that oversees the work that we do here at the High Wire. Right now, this show that you're watching right now today, and what you're seeing in these headlines is our work coming to fruition because of the lawsuits that we've won, because of the investigations, because of the white papers, and our research into vaccine safety. CNN simply only has to go to ICanDecide.org right now and look into to know what they're going to say when they decide to finally start questioning vaccines. New York Times has a great resource in all the episodes we've done, but also go to ICanDecide.org and read what we have always been saying about safety trials, how they actually should be conducted, what is the scientific gold standards that are not being adhered to. Now these national networks are following our lead.
which is an amazing moment in history. Suddenly, people are asking questions. Welcome to the club of being called an anti-vaxxer, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. I know it doesn't sound very good and it must not feel very good, but that's what I'm accused of for simply demanding better science, more transparency, more data, larger control groups, real saline placebo groups, all of those things that the world is now joining the high wire and our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network, in demanding. But I want to say, if you are sitting there right now and you're kind of getting a little bit giddy and saying, this really is amazing. The high wire has led the entire world into what is now becoming the most common discussion, the #1 headline in the world. Let me just say this. We have only just begun. If you have not recognized, this is about to turn into a war, a thought war, a truth war. And all sides are now very confused. Is Donald Trump on our side? Is he against us? Is Biden and Kamala Harris going to force a vaccine when they get into office? What's really going on? You can only count on one thing. The high wire is going to tell the truth no matter who is in office, no matter who is doing the trials, no matter what's going on. Our international team of scientists and specialists and lawyers are going to be working for you. And so if you think, oh, we're in the clear, we've only just begun and we have a ton of work to do. We have lawsuits right now that we want to launch to make sure that this vaccine is not allowed out of the laboratory if it is not safe. We are going after them, but it's really getting expensive. So I want to ask you right now, so many of you are already donating and have made all that you've seen so far today and more to come. You've made it possible. But if you keep tuning into this show and saying, wow, the high wire is amazing. They have been ahead of the curve when no one else was there, and now the world is changing. If you want to be a part of that, don't you want to wake up and when you see the show on Thursday morning, you know the show's coming, don't you want to say, whatever I'm going to watch today, I want to know I helped make that possible? Well, you can help make that possible. Please, more than just this show, the legal work we're doing is bar none. No other nonprofit has won more lawsuits in this arena than we have, and nobody has more lawsuits going as we speak. Most I can't talk about. Go to ICanDecide.org. Please become a recurring donor right now. You can go, make sure it goes to the legal fund, make sure it goes to the high wire. We're asking for $20 from 2020. If this isn't giving you everything that you hope your Netflix subscription does, or your phone bill, or everything else you pay for all the time, HBO, please support ICAN right now. We can only do this with you, and you can't imagine. The more you help us, the more we can bring this attack at a bigger and bigger and bigger level. Look what we've achieved so far. Thank you to all of you that have helped make this possible. Maybe today you just say, you know what, let me add $1 more to my recurring donation. That will make a huge difference in the amount of lawsuits and the amount of pressure we can put on this world system right now as we speak. You can't imagine what's happened. There's so much I wish I could tell you about, but you hear it when we win it, and believe me, we have a great track record of winning. Well, after celebrating all those moments, I want to have one moment that you never like to have to do on a show, and that is we have to make a slight retraction or correction to a statement that was made on the show. Now, this was not a statement made by me. This was made by my guest, Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower. He was shooting from the hip, as I do too, but he accidentally implicated a group and gave the wrong name, so I want to correct that right now. So just to be clear, do we have this so that we can show people what was said? Transition Integrity Project. Is this what Voorhees said it was called? Okay, so this is the project that Zach Voorhees meant to say, the Transition Integrity Project. What he said the name of the organization was the Election Integrity Project of California. This group does a lot of great work. They are good people that are working for the people. What Zach Voorhees was talking about was a group that was trying to manipulate how we see things. So Transition Integrity Project is the name that Zach Voorhees should have described, and instead he gave the name of the Election Integrity Project. We want to make sure that that has been made clear, that we don't want to put anything against or to say the wrong thing about anybody. So just making that correction. Okay. Moving on. There have been international scientists all around the world, world-renowned scientists. I've said it over and over again on the High Wire that there are more scientists, I believe, we've talked about them, over 100 that have come out publicly against the lockdowns, against the approaches towards the COVID-19 virus and the pandemic, saying no lockdown was necessary. We are overreacting to this entire thing. We presented so many of the scientists, whether it was just statements they'd made. One of those scientists, of the 100, all the way back, we were just looking this up, in show 156, we're in like 180 now, 162, I mean, back in May 7th, we were quoting Dr. Shukarit Bhakdi, MD, microbiologist, former professor at Johannes Gutenberg University. He said this: we are afraid that 1 million infections with the new virus will lead to 30 deaths per day over the next 100 days. But we do not realize that 20, 30, 40, or 100 patients positive for normal coronaviruses are already dying every day. He is a world-renowned scientist, I think compared to the best published hundreds of over 300 articles on immunology, bacteriology, virology, and parasitology. He has written a book with another professor, Karina Reese, who is also written, I think, over 60 articles, there we go, in cell biology, biochemistry, inflammation and infection. They got together and wrote a book, really the scientific perspective of what really happened, the false alarm of coronavirus. This book has sold, my understanding, nearly 300,000 copies, hard copies across Europe, tens of thousands of copies online, but it was in German, as the work they're doing is in Germany. The English version is now about to come out. My understanding is I think it's October 2nd. This book is going to release and I just read it. It is absolutely mind-blowing. A lot of the things that we've already covered, but it is really great to see great scientists now putting out this information. But I want to say that when we list the 100 greatest scientists in the world that are all standing up to tell the truth, there is nothing that is a greater honor than to be able to say they're now joining us on the High Wire, and that's what I can say right now. It is my privilege and my pleasure to be bringing on Professor Shukarit Bhakdi and Dr. Karina Rice. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for writing this incredibly clear and concise explanation of how we got into this mess. To begin with, Dr. Bhakdi, why write this book? I mean, we live in a time where we are seeing so much ridicule, so much pressure, even, professors losing their professorship, being kicked out of universities, or pressure onto the work that they're doing. You, I think, took a serious risk writing this book. Why did you do it?
Well, actually, it was my wife, Karina Rice. We're married. We don't have the same name, but we're married.
Okay, good to know.
Also have a child. And you see, we were both very, very, we were concerned. So upset, concerned, and depressed. My wife was so depressed that she was falling ill. She was getting stomach cramps. She couldn't sleep, and she has an old, sick mother who was doing very badly because of this crisis, forced to wear a mask. She collapsed in the supermarket because of the mask that she was wearing. And then Karina said suddenly, I can't stand it. I had been, making videos and talking to people via the videos, and they were seen many, many times, millions of times. But the thing, the video didn't stay. So Karina said, we need something that people will be able to read and reread and come back to read whenever they want to have facts. And so she sat down and she actually wrote, let's say, 80% of this book. It was a horrible lot of work because there are the literature's there. There are over 200 citations, and anyone can go in and check what we have written here. and they will see that everything that is written there is referenced.
Dr. Rice, let me jump in here because I think that a lot of people that just heard how your husband described your emotional state, so many people watching this show, so many people we know that have dealt with, that are scientists themselves, or simply just feeling like there's no reason. They're not seeing reason. We're not seeing the debate. We're hearing, one side of the story. But for you, as a professor, as you've been published, you do this work, to think about knots in your stomach, what is it like as a scientist to see how this science has been performed around this world, how it's been forced upon people? Is it scary? Are we looking at the potential death of science if debate is not allowed?
It's scary, yes. It's what we're looking at, a crime against mankind. It's not only the vaccination, it's everything around us. All these measures that destroy the childhood of our kids, that lead to so much suffering around us. So many people in our friends of ours, they could not go to the hospitals. They were afraid. It was such a panic pandemic. It wasn't not a virus pandemic, but a panic pandemic. People were afraid of a virus that's comparable to common cold viruses or even influenza, but it's not a killer virus. And so I was really depressed. But on the other hand, I get so many phone calls from my colleagues around me and emails, and all are saying the same. We understand completely what's going on, but if we would say something, we will lose our jobs. So we are afraid we can't say anything. And that's why the list of scientists who stand up is still relatively small, because so many people around us are really afraid of losing their jobs because the pressure is really high.
I read this book over the last couple of days. It's a really easy read. It's beautifully written. It's so clear. A lot of times you're worried if you're going to write a book, or read a book written by scientists, that somehow it's going to be hard to understand, but it's very, very clearly laid out. We like to bring excerpts out of a book, and I'm telling you, I had this morning, there was probably about 50 different quotes, and I said we can't do 50 quotes, but let me just go through a couple of them from the book to get a sense of some of the things you've stated, and maybe we can talk about the details of what you meant by that. Here's the first quote that I wanted to read. Each positive laboratory test for the virus was to be reported as a COVID-19 case, irrespective of clinical presentation. This definition represented an unforgivable breach of a first rule in infectiology: the necessity to differentiate between infection, which is invasion and multiplication of an agent in the host, and infectious disease, infection with ensuing illness. COVID-19 is the designation for severe illness that occurs only in about 10% of infected individuals, but because of incorrect designation, the number of cases surged. Just leaves us up for a second. When you say that it was an unforgivable breach of a first rule in infectiology, explain that to me.
Well, I've taught this for 30 years, and among the things that you say in the first hours of infectious disease lectures is that you've got to differentiate between infection and illness, infectious disease. All right. So as we now know, the number of infections with this coronavirus has skyrocketed because the virus is a very successful virus. It does not tend to kill the host. The most successful parasites and viruses are those that don't kill the host. And these coronaviruses are among the most successful. And therefore, if you look at people under 70 with no pre-existing illnesses, it is almost impossible to die because of the virus. So half of them will not even realize that they have the virus, and another 30 to 40% will not fall seriously ill. And if you're under 70, it goes even further. In fact, the death rate among people below 70 is way under 1%. It is probably in the order of 0.1 or even 0.01%. I'm saying this because it's telling everyone around the world that if you are under 70 and have no pre-existing illness, don't worry about this virus, as little as you worry about getting even the flu. The flu is more dangerous to these people who are under 70 than the coronavirus. And I'll jump right to the point. That is why we said all along that this whole business of vaccination, mass vaccination of young people, is going to fail. It cannot succeed because there's no reason to do it.
Do you think that is a lot of what they're getting away with because people don't understand they don't understand these terms, right? The difference between being infectious, infected, or having the illness. To help people understand, a lot of us get coronaviruses every year, or even flu viruses where we are asymptomatic, right? I think a lot of this is being made as though it's a brand new term. But, you know, Dr. Rice, isn't it true that we've just never focused on the people that don't have symptoms because that just means you're healthy, you have enough, you know, cross-reactive, you know, T-cell immunity or other things, but we've just never talked about these things. And so they're using that lack of knowledge against people to make them afraid of something that's a common occurrence. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, completely true. Of course, there's no reason to look at people who don't have any symptoms and are not suffering and not ill. So our little son is in the kindergarten, and in the first winter he has this running nose all the time, of course, and the coughing. And so, but these are the normal coronavirus, and it's good that children get exposed to them because then they develop their immune system, and then they are prepared if one day maybe a real dangerous virus comes. So SARS-CoV-2 was not a real dangerous virus, but it's very important that we train our immune system with these common colds. And of course, if you just sneeze around, there's no reason to do anything. But now it was so stupid and senseless that we really got angry at this stupid and absurd situation.
Let me look at another quote here. This is the next quote I thought was interesting. It's along the same lines of how they decide to count things. Another serious mistake was that every deceased person who had tested positive for the virus entered the official records as a coronavirus victim. This method of reporting violated all international medical guidelines. The absurdity of giving COVID-19 as the cause of death in a patient who dies of cancer needs no comment. Correlation does not imply causation. This was causal fallacy that was destined to drive the world into a catastrophe. Truth surrounding the virus remained shrouded in a tangle of rumors, myths, and beliefs. Now, people that have been watching the High Wire are used to this concept because this is what I've been saying the whole time. But here's why this book's important. Bring that quote up again. Once again, I've never been able to say that this method of reporting violated all international medical guidelines. There were guidelines, right? They've changed the protocol, they've changed the way that they're doing everything, and then pointing to these brand new numbers and comparing them to the old way of doing something. Just randomly, it reminds me for people that are out there, if you watch sports, you know, when you look at speed ice skating, well, once they changed the skate so that the skate could open up and stay in contact with the ice, everybody is putting up different numbers. You can't compare a new way of doing something with the old way of doing something. You can't take a new way of calculating the numbers and say, see how much more dangerous it is than the old numbers? Well, you never counted it this way. You never said that a person dying of cancer actually died of the flu. It's an incredible point, but are you alone on this, or are there a lot of scientists talking about this around the world?
There are surprisingly few scientists who make this point, but you see, the correct way of reporting the cause of death has been the motor behind driving advance. You see, take for instance lung cancer. It's because people were you know, when someone died of lung cancer, it was lung cancer. And today, if you have lung cancer and you're tested positive for corona, you're a corona death. And the lung cancer is forgotten. That means that the incidence of lung cancer may be going down in the next years, which would be very bad, because it was because people saw that there were so many people in the Western Hemisphere who got lung cancer that the scientists started asking, what was the common denominator? And then they came down to the cigarettes, of course, and nicotine. And then all the science started that showed that smoking was dangerous and caused lung cancer. This sort of thing would not happen and will not happen if we continue obscuring the truth with a false diagnosis.
That's a brilliant point. Karina, what are you doing to try to get other scientists? I mean, it's not lost on me. Why would it be lost on scientists that study this stuff?
Yeah, it's difficult. So there are always a few who want to make profit out of this, of course. Yeah. So it's always difficult to get money for scientific research. It's really a hard business to get money, and research is really expensive. And now you have the opportunity to get huge amount of money, millions of euros or dollars, to do science on a virus that we won't have in 2 years anymore, because it will be mutated and it will look different. So, but in the moment you can get so much money, it's unbelievable, and so many are trying to profit from the situation. That's for sure. Others, as I mentioned, others they have fear because they might lose their jobs. They are really threatened, and others are really focusing just on their own scientific things, and they don't want to keep actively out of this. But I think in this situation that we have, this very special situation where we're looking at something that we never experienced before in this democracy, also in Germany and all around the world, I think the scientists have to stand up. And what we try to do in every 3 minutes that we have is that we try to convince people. We are giving talks in the cities here around in Germany, and we try to inform the people so that they really that they wake up. That's the thing that we can do, and we really spend quite a lot of time to do this.
Very good. You know, you make a good point, though, and I hadn't thought about that. On the one hand, you have scientists that are afraid, but you have this massive cash cow right now. Why fight an industry that's just going to hand you millions and millions of dollars for research? You had a great line in here, something like, every Tom, Dick, and Harry is doing science out there. We're going to have more of the most irrelevant science that's ever been done on anything. It's not going to point to anything. The outcomes, as you've said, we're going to be so focused on coronavirus that we may even hurt the data collection in the real issues like lung cancer, heart disease, COPD, and diabetes that's going on. One of the things that I thought was interesting, and I've never seen a lot of times science always says, well, that's anecdotal. This entire thing is so anecdotal, it's incredible. If they find one person in the world that gets reinfected with coronavirus, they say, see, you can be reinfected, the antibodies don't last, or the T cells don't work, as though these anomalies are the truth in science. Or there's another problem where they start they make it novel, right? They take a symptom or an issue and call it novel when it's been happening all the time. That's why I thought this next quote was really interesting. A high frequency of lung embolisms was already described in deceased influenza patients 50 years ago. Thus, we are not on the verge of discovering a unique property of SARS-CoV-2 that would heighten its threat, but we do bear witness to the absurd situation where the elderly seek to protect themselves by obeying the chant that sounds around the world: stay at home. Physical inactivity is pre-programmed, thrombosis included. Swedish epidemiologist Professor Johan Giesecke recommended exactly the opposite: as much fresh air and activity as possible. the man knows his job. I mean, you make an interesting point. We say, first of all, look, we've got this embolism problem. We have these blood clots in the lungs. This is something this is why COVID-19 is so dangerous. You're pointing out that has been a side, one of the effects or one of the problems with multiple different respiratory conditions. But even worse, you exacerbate the issue if you sit for a long time and you're elderly. You exacerbate it if you're not out getting exercise and air. So in many ways, by pointing this out, they aren't protecting anybody. They're scaring everybody into the one position that they're going to increase their risk.
Right.
Does that make you want to scream from the top of a mountaintop?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Terrible.
Amazing.
So it's not only that people were not moving around. So it's very important that old people get fresh air, they move, that they do something for themselves, meet other people. To be without social context is such counterproductive. It's unbelievable. And moreover, so in Germany they said, don't visit anyone. So please, your son or daughter might bring the food and put it in front of the door. Then you just have to open the door and get the food inside, and don't touch anyone, don't meet anyone. So, but especially the olders, which have serious diseases, and then they get their heart attack or something else, then you need someone who's there to go to the telephone to help you. You need someone who's taking care of you. But we left all these people alone, and they were dying alone because they did not go to the hospital, because they thought when we go to the hospital, they are overwhelmed and maybe I get COVID-19, oh God. So I stay at home, and then so many people died at home so senselessly.
It's amazing, and when you...
Amazing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and those who went to the hospital to die there died in utter loneliness. This was the most inhuman thing that the politicians did. It's the weakest of the society that has suffered the most. The old people, the dying. Who wants to die alone? It's so inhuman to impose this on them, to close the hospitals. We saw relatives, people standing outside the hospital crying because their father, their mother, their grandmother was dying inside and not allowed to see anyone. This is so ridiculous. And we were not able to understand how society would accept this, but they did. And this is very, very scary. The second thing is our children who are forced to wear these damned, stupid masks. Such an idiocy. I tell the people around here, I'm Buddhist, but I tell them God gave you 3 gifts, and the 3 greatest gifts that he gave you were your face, your voice, with the voice, because this is what makes you the individual, the human that you are. No animal has this gift of God. Then your brain with which you can think, Homo sapiens, the wise, the knowing. And third, your soul and your heart with which you can love and care. And now what is happening is that politics has changed the whole world. Dehumanize them. Don't show your face anymore. Keep yourself masked. Don't interact. Your children are going to grow up weird, I tell you. There are going to be long-lasting effects on their psyche. And this is immoral. It should really be punished. Then stop thinking. If you start doubting anything we say, then you're going to get fired. I was a guest in her lab because I'm retired now. So I joined her lab. I had an official status as the guest of the University of Kiel. I have been not fired. I was never hired. I never received a salary, but I no longer am allowed to enter the lab and do science. Okay, So they kicked me out as well as they could. And third, harden your soul. Don't feel sorry for those old guys who are dying alone. Don't feel sorry for the people who are going broke because you destroyed their existence.
Yeah.
They'll be okay. Someone will take care of them. See that you protect yourself so that you don't go and endanger those guys who will then die because of you. I mean, this is absolutely perfidious. It's perfidious. Sorry, I had to say this.
And you make such great points because we're being guilted into believing that if we don't wear the mask, we're putting the elderly at risk. That how could we be so selfish? But you make a great point. How about all of the millions of elderly that are dying this year naturally, whether it's cancer or heart disease? They're in those last years of life, and you are making them die all alone with no one around them, no one to say goodbye to, no one to hug them, to take care of them. Where is the inhumanity there? I'm inhuman because I'm not concerned about a cold virus that is naturally going to be very dangerous for anyone in that situation. And because I'm not worried about that cold, I want to be able to go and visit my grandma or my grandfather in their last days so that they have someone around them. That's the inhumanity, and you made such a great point pointing that out. What was really interesting, because you are both, prolific scientists in Germany, you actually were involved with reaching out to Angela Merkel and you wrote letters, right? Why is it there's only, as you said, like 2 scientists that are doing all of the talking in Germany, and the rest of you are not being included? I mean, it seems to me, if this is truly a pandemic, and we are truly concerned and going to forge new territory into new ways of dealing with something, locking down, we've never locked down the world before, why are you not a part of the conversation?
Well, because dissidents are not wanted, and there's a lot of pressure being put on us. But we have to say that we are now gaining a little bit of hope. There's a ray of hope, a ray of sunshine, because more and more scientists and doctors are standing up now to say no. They really across the globe, and we're in contact with them. We've formed an association of scientists and medics, and we have thousands of members already.
Great.
So we're not quite alone, no. There are others, and some very, very prolific and very, very excellent scientists among them.
Well, I want to thank you for the work you've done. We could go on and on. This book is full of tons of science and information describing all the different ways that this thing has been manufactured. I think the best way, everyone, this is where you're going to be able to purchase it. Go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It comes out at the very beginning of October. This is the book you hand to all of your friends that are running around with masks, screaming their heads off, won't let you in the house, terrified to go out in the air, waiting for a vaccine that will never work. There's even incredible discussions about the vaccines, why we would need a vaccine, the questions we should ask. But I think I'd like to just finish this out with the very last statement that you make in the book, because I think it's very powerful. Here's how the book ends. And as you read these lines, human experiments are underway with gene-based vaccines whose ominous dangers have never been revealed to the thousands of unknowing volunteers. We are bearing witness to the downfall and destruction of our heritage, to the end of the age of enlightenment. May this little book awaken Homo sapiens of this earth to rise and live up to their name and put an end to this senseless self-destruction. I couldn't say it better. I want to thank you for your time. I hope that we'll be able to bring you on again and we can get into more details as this moves forward, as we really try and look at what these vaccines are doing and not doing. Are they safe? This is going to become, I think, a more and more intense issue. And I'd love to help work with the group of scientists that you've put together. Actually, I'm going to call you right after this because I think that there's some politicians looking for some help, and maybe we can get some real international bodies of scientists behind politicians that might be moving in the right direction. So we'll have that conversation off the record. But thank you so much for having the courage, for standing up for all of those international scientists that may be afraid to do so. I hope that they will follow in your footsteps, and maybe they'll write a book too. everybody, don't miss this book. It's really brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Bhakdi, Professor Rice, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I mean, you really, I can't say enough about this incredible book. A lot of these things we've covered. We've had these world-renowned scientists coming on to the High Wire this entire time. We now have news agencies reaching out to us, some that are in alternative media around the world, saying, we've been looking at your past episodes and we agree with you, but how is it that you got to this first? How did you know from the very beginning all of these things were going to be an issue? And I say because we expected it. I have been saying for the last 2 years that the pharmaceutical industry was going to attempt to take over the governments of the world. I've said it on stages. I can prove it. You can find those speeches online. So once you expect something coming, you have a very different perspective of where you need to look. We've also investigated vaccines for the greatest. We've done the most in-depth, investigation into vaccines in the history of any nonprofit that I know of, specifically looking at the word safety. And so when we start talking about safety, we know where the bodies are buried. We know how they bury the bodies. We know how they make the sausage. None of this was lost on us. We are now leading all of mainstream media to where you find your answers. And so it's an incredible time. But speaking of all incredible times and role reversals, at a time where people come onto our show and say, you should really take vitamins, recommending vitamin D, vitamin C, maybe zinc. And then I get reports that that doctor is now under review for their license. I was shocked when I heard arguably the world's leading doctor say this.
Should moms be doing something just to boost our kids' immune system? Do you need more vitamin C? Do they need more spinach? Is there anything we should be doing? Elderberry.
There are 2 vitamins that you should consider. For example, if you are deficient in vitamin D, that does have an impact on your susceptibility to infection. So I would not mind recommending, and I do it myself, taking vitamin D supplements. The other vitamin that people take is vitamin C because it's a good antioxidant. So if people want to take a gram or 2 at the most of vitamin C, that would be fine. So vitamin C and vitamin D, okay.
Pretty amazing revelation there from the head of NIAID, now saying that he himself takes vitamin D and vitamin C. I find that shocking only because we've had doctors on the High Wire that have made statements exactly like that. The use of vitamin D, very important to boost the immune system, doses of vitamin C, and then those doctors report that they are now under review by the medical board. I wonder if the world's, biggest, baddest doctor in the world is going to be under review for admitting that he takes vitamin D and C. Now, to get to the bottom of what D and C might actually do, though, why don't we bring on a doctor that has never been afraid of losing her license, is one of the most outspoken, powerful, awesome doctors in the world. I'm talking about none other than Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. Sherry, can you hear me?
I can. Good afternoon, Dal. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to join us. First of all, are you somewhat shocked that the Anthony Fauci that has been pushing for a vaccine and the only way to get out of this seems to be really dependent on pharma and drugs, and that's his world, actually just admitted that he takes vitamin supplements like vitamin D and C? Or do you think they all are doing that behind the scenes and just sort of poo-poo vitamins usually out in public?
Well, I think it is pretty interesting that he's now admitting that and sort of like tongue-in-cheek, almost laughing. Del, from the time all of this COVID nonsense started, and they started talking about testing, I said, the one thing people should be having tested is their vitamin D level. They should forego the COVID testing, which we know has as high as a 30% false negative rate, and in some of the labs, 100% false positive rate. Instead of doing all of that and subjecting yourself to DNA harvesting, which is what the whole program is about, we should be going out and getting our vitamin D tested. And the appropriate level of D is a test called 25-hydroxy vitamin D, which is written like 25-OH vitamin D. That's the active form. That's the form that we check for in the blood. And the range on that vitamin D level generally comes back from a lab somewhere between 30 and 100. So it's very important for patients when you get your blood test back and the nurse or whoever calls you and says, yes, your vitamin D level is normal, to ask them specifically what your number is. Because in order for it to be therapeutic and prevent you from getting viral infections, bacterial infections, to have an anti-cancer effect, particularly against breast, colon, and prostate cancer, that level needs to be targeted to be somewhere between 80 and 100. So if you have a level that comes back that's 31 and the nurse or nurse practitioner calls and says, oh, your level is normal, it may be in the laboratory-derived normal range, but it's not in an optimized therapeutic level.
So what is it that vitamin D does in the body? I mean, my understanding is if you're getting enough sun, vitamin D is coming from the sun. You don't need to take supplements. But I know also so many of us use suntan lotion now and are blocking out the sun. But there just seems to be a lot of discussion now about vitamin D. I remember when I worked on the doctors, 7, 8 years ago, we were just starting to hear medical doctors discussing the need for vitamin D in the immune system. It is becoming a bigger and bigger discussion point. Why vitamin D, and what does that have to do with our immune system?
Well, vitamin D, by some circles, they actually even call it a pre-hormone because it's made in your skin. It's activated by the sunlight, like you were speaking about, but then it's activated by the kidney, and then the vitamin D level has a different therapeutic location in all the different organ systems in your body. You have to have adequate vitamin D levels to absorb calcium, for calcium into your bones, to be able to absorb calcium from your gut into your blood. Vitamin D is the base molecule for your hormones, for like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Vitamin D helps with all of the support of your white blood cells. The Vitamin D Council is a great resource for everyone. It has almost an endless number of articles, published articles over the last 10, 15, 20 years, showing the benefit of vitamin D and how important it is to all the different areas in your system. Now, you mentioned a little bit about the sunlight. It's really important for people like, I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, so it's really important for people to understand that when you live north of the 40th parallel, and the 40th parallel, if you took a map of the United States and you drew a line from San Francisco to Washington, D.C., that's approximately the 40th parallel. When you're north of that line, the sunlight as it comes onto the earth isn't really strong enough to give you all the adequate stimulation you need on your skin in order to develop and produce adequate enough vitamin D. That's why it's really important for people in the northern territories here north of the 40th parallel in the U.S. and Europe, and south of the 40th parallel for those good friends of ours that are living south of that, in South America, Australia, and New Zealand, because as your show is worldwide, that they know that those levels in the sunshine isn't really enough. Now, it's a good thing, particularly in the summer when the sun is much higher. That's usually the standard recommendation is to go outside butt naked, as they say, or at least with your skin all exposed as much as you can. No sunscreen, no hat, no shirt, no anything like that, for a minimum of 20 minutes a day, preferably in the morning, somewhere between 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning, where you get really good types of sun rays instead of sun scorching, burning rays that happen somewhere between noon and, say, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you do get good stimulation for that. Another thing is that African-American people with dark colored skin, a lot of Indian patients, people that have a darker colored skin, all of them tend to be vitamin D deficient because there's the color in their skin, the melanin in their skin blocks out the stimulatory effects of the sunshine. And I think that that's really important, Del, in the African-American population, because it's also been published in the medical literature that it's nearly impossible to lose weight if you're vitamin D deficient, if you have a vitamin D level less than 25. And a lot of people in that African American population have issues with obesity, diabetes, and hypertension, all of which are related to low vitamin D levels. So that population of people very much needs to get tested and work hard by taking supplements, because you really can't do it with foods, to take supplements to get your level up between 80 and 100 to be protective for your physiology.
Do you think that that's why? Is vitamin D maybe directly related, or one of the reasons why we are seeing COVID-19, that one of the risk groups that's so often talked about is the African American community here in the States?
Could very well be for that particular reason. You know, another thing that if I've been saying that if you're going to go and get a blood test and not a COVID test, or a SARS-CoV-2 test to be more accurate, not only should you get a vitamin D level done, you should get an iodine level done, because iodine is your body's natural antiseptic. It's important, and it's not just important for thyroid. It's important from your mouth all the way through to your rectum. It's important for the tears in your eyes. It's important to protect your brain. And so iodine levels need to be tested too. And that level should be therapeutically and to be physiologically protective somewhere around 100. It needs to be somewhere around that level. Del, I've said for a really long period of time that we've known from the NHANES studies that many pregnant women, even in the United States, are really, really deficient in iodine. The International Association of Iodine Deficiency Diseases is actually bigger than the World Health Organization on a global basis. And iodine deficiency with a level less than 19, and if you happen to be pregnant, puts your infant at great risk. But I've often wondered if it wasn't one of the many risk factors that puts many children at risk when they're born to increasing vaccine injuries, because mothers were low in their vitamin D, low in iodine when they were pregnant. So babies obviously were going to be low in those two protective nutrients when they're born. And then, of course, we hit them with vitamin K and hepatitis B right after their birth, and then the stomp up of the schedule. And I've often wondered if that wasn't a contributor. I've never seen any literature on that. I do know that the iodine levels in Oriental women, particularly Japanese women and Chinese women, because they eat a lot of sea vegetables and a lot of seaweed and a lot of fish, that their iodine levels tend to be much higher than Caucasian people in the United States and in Europe. And so those are two levels that I think are really, really important. And I know Dr. Fauci also mentioned vitamin C. I mean, Linus Paulding got, the Nobel Prize way back in the 30s or 40s. So it's not really new news. And I think that vitamin C is so important as an antioxidant. And I'm a big fan of vitamin C ascorbates, the salt in the powder form. And the powder form I like the best because it's most easily absorbed, and you can give it to any age group and not have to think about swallowing pills or about whether that pill is going to dissolve in your stomach.
That sounds great. You're an amazing wealth of knowledge. And I have to tell you, I really want to be honest with you, Sherry. I've just been out. I'm beginning to tour again now that the airlines are opening up and so many people, are having rallies around the country. But everywhere I go, Sherry, people pull me aside. First of all, they ask me, is Sherry going to be here? But the amount of people that say that the person that changed my life or saved my baby or really made me understand what was happening with vaccines was Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. I know they probably come up to you, but I just want you to know how many people come up to me and go out of their way to tell me to thank you for setting them on a course for healthier children. And many times you've worked directly with them with their own health issues. So you are such a great resource, which leads me to the next thing I want to talk about. You have come on this show before, and you do these courses to educate people online on, how to understand vaccines better, how to maintain health, how to raise our children, an entire life health course that is so powerful. In fact, here's just a clip of that course that you can take online. Take a look at this.
Well, hello everyone. We are back again. Welcome to the continuation of Module 3 in the Mastering Vaccine Info Foundational Course and Training. The fear generated by the word polio has led to a multi-generational indoctrination, a horrible fear of paralysis. So what is polio? The polio virus is a member of the enterovirus group of viruses. They are transient inhabitants of the gastrointestinal tract. There were at least 6 different manifestations of polio infections, and up to 72% of people who were exposed to a polio virus had no symptoms whatsoever. 96% of all polio infections at the height of the polio epidemics were asymptomatic. And did you notice the reference on this slide for this information? The 13th edition of the book, Epidemiology and Prevention of Vaccine-Preventable Diseases, more commonly referred to as the Pink Book. So the big question is this: how many persons in those medical groups actually read the information published by the CDC specifically for them? How many actually know that 96% of polio infections were mild or even asymptomatic? Paralytic polio did exist, but it was rare, occurring in less than 1% of all polio infections. That means that 0.0021% of all cases of polio had a serious infection, and the infection could have been complicated enough that the person was placed on an iron lung machine. The true incidence of paralysis caused by a polio virus was almost negligible.
So, Sherry, you've been at this a very long time. You have one of the most thorough libraries of information that people can access about all of the questions you might have about vaccines and health. But you have a new course coming up that people can enroll in. And I'd really like to make this the call to action this week, because one of the biggest issues, Sherry, is people want to talk to their friends. They want to be able to have intelligent conversations, but they have a hard time with the talking points or understanding how to approach it. And, I would love to have the time to sit down and teach people. I think people get something from the high wire and they use it. But to actually have a course, someone walking them through these points, how to address these points, talk to politicians, talk to their friends. Tell me how the course works and what do people need to know? How do they sign up and how often do the classes happen and all of that stuff?
Well, we call it the Mastering Vaccine Info Bootcamp course. It's only offered twice a year. It's 8 weeks. It's online. And I'm proud to say we've had people from about 18 countries that have taken our course online, even from Pakistan, South Korea, Japan, the Maldives. I mean, people from all over the world have taken our course. A lot of people from Australia, New Zealand, Canada, UK, etc. It's an 8-week course. We only offer it twice a year. So we're in an open enrollment week right now. It's just for 1 week is open enrollment. It closes. You won't hear another thing about it. And quite frankly, Del, this may be the last Mastering Vaccine Info Bootcamp course that we do, just because so much has changed out there in the vaccine world. We'll know a lot more after the first of the year. But people who have waited to take this course, this may be the last course. Every Saturday, there is a course that you can access every Saturday. It's home study. You study on your own from Saturday till the following Thursday. Then on Thursday night, my business partner Matt and I host an online Zoom call for everybody that's in the class to discuss the course content and other types of topics of that week. We do that for 8 weeks, and we cover topics such as safe and effective herd immunity, and quite frankly, I think the herd immunity module is one of the best course modules I've ever put together, if I can toot my own horn on that a little bit, because it really does drill down. We talk about, we actually teach people how to read a package insert. So many times we tell people, go read a package insert, but if you don't have a science background or come from that world, you open that big piece of paper up and lay it across the table, it can be pretty daunting. So we go through it in a stepwise fashion so they can learn and then they can teach others. We also talk about the ramp up of the schedule, that from 1985 to the present. Now, in the past boot camps, we've also talked about smallpox and polio, because as you know, when you start with somebody new, that's always the place it starts from. What about smallpox and what about polio? That was 4 hours worth of, that was four modules, so about 2.5 hours worth of content. We have moved that over into Vaccine U, and that will be part of people's free bonuses that we will offer them. And instead, we've replaced it with a whole set of content about COVID, about the
great.
masks, about social distancing, about contact tracing, about this horrible stuff about the vaccines and what's coming with the vaccine, with the hydrogel and the nanobots and the nanotechnology. And my business partner, in between each one of those didactic models, Matt teaches language training on how to communicate well, how to be a better speaker, how to get in and out of heated discussions without losing your friends, how to open doors to people with closed minds. And this time he's putting together a whole new module on the basics of activism and supremely good communication. So about a third of our course is brand new content that we've never done before that is timely for right now.
You know, Sherry, so many people, and for those of you out there, you say, you know, Del, what should I do? What is it I need to do next? And I always say, you've got to follow your intuition. Something inside of you is telling you what you should do, whether it's walk over to the pregnant woman in the grocery store and, you know, have a discussion with her about, you know, health or vitamins or vaccines, whatever you're guided to do. But if you just heard, you know, Sherry talking about that, and you said, you know, I would really love to be awesome at talking about this. I'm tired of, you know, looking for those talking points. I know they're inside of me, but I don't know how to address them, or I don't have the information to, you know, hand over. Then I would recommend this course. We've had people that work at the High Wire that are going to be working on the science to break it down for the show, actually take this course so that they have a better understanding of what we're doing here. And so, Sherry, I want to thank you for the work that you've done, for all of the lives that you've saved, and for this incredible course. Where do we go to check it out? Where online can we find the course if we want to sign up?
Well, if you want more background information, because you know $495, you probably want to learn more about it before you pay the enrollment fee. If you go to Vaxxter.com, which is my main website, V as in victory, AXXTER, the first article there talks about everything I just said. It drills down on what comes through the course and how the course content works. The second article is about the 8 bonuses that comes along. So that's right there on the website. If you're like, hey, I'm in, I just want to go register, you can go to masteringvaccineinfo.com/bootcamp, and that gets you directly into the course. And we really hope that you'll join us this time. We hope, and for people who have enrolled in the past, people who have gone through the course in the past, we actually have a discount for everybody who's been an alumni person who wants to go through it again and just be part of the conversation. It's $195. So they get a $300 discount to sign up if they've been an alumni.
Well, it's so great, Sherry, because we're all going to need to be on the ground, no matter how these, you know, elections turn out in the fall here. It is clear that pharma is trying to not only buy presidents, but congressmen, senators, assembly members, you know, in states. And more we need to get active. We need to be able to walk into these, you know, houses of government and be able to speak the truth clearly. So if you are a person that has the time and has the desire, please become one of those very well-educated warriors, and there's no better way to do it than working with Sherry. Sherry, thank you for taking the time. Thanks for enlightening us on vitamins, and have a great time with your course, and I know I'll see you out there on the speaking circuit really soon. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Del. I will say one last thing. A tagline on our course is confident parents, intelligent leaders, and articulate activists. So I look forward to meeting you, seeing you again real soon in person. Thanks so much, Del.
All right. Take care, Sherry. Well, you know, taking a course like that is a call to action. We need to be out there. We need to be getting the truth out there. But there's other ways to be educated, right? Like going to a rally where all the great speakers around the country gather in one place. That's what happened just 2 days ago when I was in Wichita, Kansas, for the Freedom Revival in the Heartland. It was an amazing experience. Many of you watched it stream live on the High Wire. But there was a later portion of the night where we got into the rally. There were some battle cries. I was one of them making it. Here's a taste of what took place in Kansas, especially in the final hours of the Freedom Revival in the Heartland. Take a look at this.
My name is Debbie Mize, and I am with Kansans for Health Freedom, Vice President. So we started as an organization quite out of necessity. We needed one loud voice to fight for freedom.
My name is Dr. Jay Goodbinder,
and I'm own the Epigenetics Healing Center. It's outside of Kansas City, Missouri. I think most of the people here are very well educated. They're very friendly. They don't want to live in a world of fear. They appreciate being able to connect with other people and not be scared of them.
My name is Stephen Owens. I'm the representative for the 74th House District here in Kansas. We need to be more vocal with our political leaders and those that are in office. Now, more than ever, we are seeing the importance of being able to take action. We're seeing the importance of needing people willing to stand up.
Just seeing people's faces is such a big deal. Like, I don't think people understand how important connection is.
It is something significant to see someone's face smiling at you, to read emotions.
You have a media that is absolutely controlled by the pharmaceutical industry. That's telling you every day to be scared. The only reason we have a pandemic today is because the media is telling you there's a pandemic. I'll tell you where the pandemic is. It's in the 60,000 new cases of autism that we have every year in this country. Today, we are being asked to accept that. Tony Fauci, whose job it is for 50 years, to tell us what is the etiology of the allergic diseases and the chronic diseases that are affecting our people. The chronic disease rate in our country back then was 12%. Today, under his watch, it's over 54%.
This pandemic is our tool. It has been handed to us. Fauci looks like a moron every time he speaks. People no longer trust the CDC. They're turning their back on the FDA. The United States of America is no longer funding the WHO. And Bill Gates is hated on every single television program he goes on to. Their plan is failing. This burn that's happening inside of our skin, inside of our hearts, is making us all scream for freedom! 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 And that is what we stand for. That is who we are. Well, it was an amazing event there in Kansas. Luckily, every week I get to have a little bit more calm version of myself here on the High Wire, but I love doing those live events, rallies, whatever you want to call them. I'm heading out actually tomorrow for North Dakota. I'm going to be in Bismarck, North Dakota on Saturday for the rally there. I think also October 3rd, I'm in Austin, where we're going to be having a freedom rally. And then I've got AmpFest I'm going to be at on October 8th. And actually, we're going to do a live show from AmpFest at Doral Country Club in Miami, Florida on October the 8th. I'll be speaking on the 10th on multiple panels. I'm at Red Pill Expo that Sunday, the 11th. So I'm going to be very, very busy over the next few weeks as we move towards this election, trying to get the truth out to everyone that will listen. No matter what side of the political aisle you are on, I think the world is now waking up to the truth. They're all starting to ask the right questions about safety, about how vaccines are made. Welcome to the sausage business, everybody. The High Wire has been leading the way for a very long time. I want to talk about really quickly, just to end this show, if you are watching right now and you haven't at least signed up to our email list, please go to thehighwire.com right now. Sign up to our email list. Everyone on the email list is going to be getting a newsletter. We give out a weekly newsletter that talks about the things that have been in the show, but also to discuss the legal issues that we're involved in, whether it's a lawsuit or a win or a petition that we're putting forward. This last week was one that was particularly dear to me and important because it's been about a vaccine that has bothered me from the very first day I went on the road with Vax, the movie that got me into the middle of this. It was the discussion of the hepatitis B vaccine. Vax was about the MMR vaccine, but Hep B really bothered me. The more I looked into this vaccine, the aluminum content off the charts, how much aluminum, a known neurotoxin, is being injected into a day-one-old baby. But as I've toured the country and the world, almost every PowerPoint starts out with the discussion of why are we asking these questions about vaccines? What is our issue? And I talk about the fact that almost every drug we take is tested with placebo, gold standard, double-blind placebo studies for 5 years, 10 years, Enbrel. You know, we have all of these examples of drugs getting 5-year safety reviews. But the hepatitis B vaccine, as we discovered very early on, there's two versions of it, whether it's Merck or GlaxoSmithKline's, and both of them are either 4 or 5 days. Here's the inserts. This is something I've been talking about for years. If you've been watching this, we're about to do something about it. But for those of you that are brand new, look at this. This is what they admit to in the insert that your doctor never shows you when they're about to inject your day 1-old baby. This is Recombavax HB vaccine. Look at what it admits in its clinical trial experience. It was monitored for safety for 5 days after each dose, monitored for 5 days. Recombavax HB, not 5 weeks, not 5 months, certainly not the 5 years every drug, you know, like Viagra that Grandpa's taking. We made sure that that was safe for Grandpa, but your day 1-old baby, a 5-day safety monitoring review. And then there's the other version, Engerix B. This one was monitored for an entire 4 days after administration. And it was given to, look at that. And look at the numbers here. 5,000, you can look right above. 5,071 healthy adults and children were given the vaccine. So it wasn't even just babies who were giving it to now. It was adults and children. 5,000. Think about when we're looking at these trials with COVID-19 right now. 30,000 real saline placebos. How long are those going to be studied? But this is the question. How long? And we've asked it multiple times. We've been all over this. We submitted all the way back in 2017 a request to the CDC to show us, please list and provide the safety data relied upon when recommending babies receive the hepatitis B vaccine on the first day of life. How did you determine that the first day of life was the right time to give this vaccine? Hello, welcome to the world. You're gasping for your first breath, and here comes your first sexually transmitted disease. Did you know that hepatitis B vaccine was designed mostly for homosexuals and those that were taking place in promiscuous sexual activities? That's who it was designed for. Intravenous drug users, people like that. That's who it was designed for. I'm not trying to disparage any group, but people that live riskier lifestyles, that's who the vaccine's designed for. But none of them would show up into a clinic to take it. So they decided why don't we give it to day 1-old babies? Do you know what your risk of hepatitis B vaccine is in a day 1-old baby? It's 0. It's absolutely 0, 0, 0, 0, unless your mother has hepatitis B. And guess what? She got a blood test before she ever gave birth, so we know whether she has hepatitis B or not. So then we could consider whether or not to vaccinate that child. But to give this to every baby with only a 4 or 5 day safety review and every request, whether it was in 2020, 2018, multiple times, we've been demanding answers. How are you giving this vaccine that has only got a 4 or 5 day safety review? And if we're wrong, then show us the longer trial. Show us the saline placebo group. Show us this trial that, tested safety for 6 months or a year or hopefully 4 or 5 years. They have never done it. No matter how many times we request it, they are leaving us with the understanding that we now know. At one point, the last request we made, they sent us 1,264 pages of information. And guess what? Maybe they thought we weren't going to read it. We read all 1,264 pages to come to the conclusion that we are injecting a vaccine with untested aluminum adjuvants that have never been tested, injected into human beings and what they do, based on the aluminum that was based on oral studies in rats, not injected. Oral studies is where they came up with their conclusion. And even after that, we know that the amount of aluminum is absolutely off the charts. Well, because of that, we are now filing a petition, much like the petition we filed against the FDA to demand a saline placebo group in the phase 3 trials of the COVID-19 vaccine. We are now demanding that hepatitis B vaccines given to day 1-old babies be halted. That, here it is, ICANN files formal petition demanding that the FDA withdraw its licensure of hepatitis B vaccines until you do some real damn science. Given the foregoing, it has come time to take formal action. ICANN's legal team, therefore, on September 4th, 2020, formally filed a petition to the FDA demanding that the licensure of the hepatitis B vaccines be revoked or suspended until their safety, as required by law, is determined in a properly designed clinical trial of sufficient duration, you will not find a human being, you will not find a doctor or a scientist on this planet that will tell you that 4 or 5 days is all you need to determine safety in any vaccine. It's obscene, and we have had it. So if you want to help us with this mission, we would love for you to go and help and sign on to the petition. Here's how you do it. You simply go to Citizens Petition. It's at regulations.org. Is it .org? It is, right? And then just write a comment in there. Now, of course, you submit, there it is, the bit.ly/2RVOG4E. And if you can't remember that, take a screenshot right now. Go back. You can rewatch this. Please help us out. Go ahead and write your comment of how egregious you think it is to be injecting day-one-old babies with a product that had a 4 or 5 day safety review. We are relentless. Have you noticed that? I'm not giving up. I am tired of this. We are standing up, and finally, CNN and New York Times, get in line, guys. Get behind us, because we've had it right from the beginning. We have it right every day that we do this show. I have the best scientists. I have the best producers that I stole from CBS. I have parents of vaccine-injured children that have guided us to the doctors that have changed their lives. We have the best team there is in news. If you care about your health, if you care about vaccines, if you care about this pandemic, if you want to know the truth, there's only one place you should be. There's only one place that you should be donating to make sure we can keep doing this great work. We are leading the charge, and now everyone is following us. I don't mean to sound arrogant about it, but it feels really good today to say, welcome to the High Wire, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the High Wire insiders who make this show possible. If you'd like to become a High Wire insider, then go to our website, thehighwire.com, and sign up now. And please, share the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, BitChute, and now on Roku. Because knowledge is power, censorship is real, and we need all the help we can get.